when our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with the loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, and then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Hillsborough's online worship service. My name is Dave Yelton, and I'm the worship coordinator for today. I want to thank all of you for joining us for this service. In creating this program for you, my partners include Aviva Enoch, our musical director, Wendy Calvin, our video producer and editor, Cadence Volkheimer and Caroline Welty, our worship assistants today, and a number of wonderful singers who are featured throughout the service. We're especially blessed once again to have as our guest speaker the Reverend Lisa Garcia Sampson, who currently serves as the Executive Director of Forward Together, the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ministry of North Carolina. In this role, she has the pleasure of working alongside UUs across the state to do spiritually grounded justice work, spanning racial, economic, immigrant, environmental, and electoral justice. Before moving here with her spouse from New England just 2 years ago, Lisa's first career was in urban education for 7 years in Providence, Rhode Island. Then, upon graduating from Boston University's School of Theology in 2018, she served as a full-term intern minister at the First Church, Boston, the original Unitarian home church in America, which is not a bad gig at all for a young minister, a UU minister in training. So, Reverend Lisa, we are pleased and blessed to have you with us, and we look forward to your message to us today.
As a congregation, we are committed to working for social justice and social equity in our community. An important part of this support comes in the form of our weekly online donations, which are separate and apart from our yearly pledges for the operating budget. So each week we invite you to contribute to our special Share the Plate offering, which we share with one of our local partners in this vital ongoing community work. Our community partner for this month is New Hope Elementary School Discretionary Fund for Economic and Social Equity to help with special ongoing needs of children at risk in our community. So please give generously online as shown on the screen. We thank you and your community thanks you.
As we now prepare for worship, let's remind ourselves and the world just who we are and why we gather this way each week. We are a community of liberal, open-minded people who strive to connect with one another in love. We are a people defined by covenant, not by creed, which means that we are committed to a way of being with and supporting one another, rather than committing ourselves to any one statement of common belief. To that end, we support each other in our individual spiritual growth and deepening of faith. We challenge one another to find more love both inside ourselves and in the world. And while our physical meeting space is located here at 1710 Old Highway 10 at the corner of Lawrence Road, today we invite all of you who are part of our larger spiritual online community, whether you are here in the greater Hillsborough area or elsewhere in North Carolina or throughout the country, to join with us in our online house of worship. So now let us begin today's service in our time-honored way as we light our Unitarian Universalist chalice.
Lighting the Chalice by Deborah Falk. The chalice lit among us is a beacon of hope in a world of crisis, a beacon of possibility expressed in community, a beacon of warmth through our interconnections, a beacon of light illuminating our shared wisdom, and a beacon of connection by our being together.
Good morning. Our opening words today are from the Reverend Scott Taylor. We gather as a house of stories. As we learn of those who have gone before, the way in front of us becomes more clear. As we weave together the tales of who we are, our loneliness lessens, and the web of our oneness is revealed. As we listen deeply in those times of tender trust, we descend into the longings and learnings, hopes and fears of the humanity we share. Beneath the wells from which we drink, there is a deeper well that feeds them all. Come, let us tell each other tales of our thirst. Let us drink from the stories that sustain us all. Come, let us worship together.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. In my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. In my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. In my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. In my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears tears like the raindrops.
I got tears like the raindrops. Got tears like the raindrops in my soul.
In my soul.
I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. Ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a sharing community where our joys are celebrated, and a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. Each Sunday, we take a moment to share and reflect on the special happenings that have occurred this week in our lives. For those of you who would like to share in the comments or the chat, please do so. And know that everything shared aloud or felt in silence is held dearly in the heart of this community.
Our reading this morning is from Reverend George Tiger, U.S. Army chaplain and UU minister. Paul Tillich said, "The courage to be is the courage to accept oneself in spite of being unacceptable. Made in the image of God, endowed with inherent worth and dignity, we are bombarded by messages that we are other than this. We are told we must be something other than ourselves to be accepted. But there is another message out there, taught by great religious prophets and teachers throughout history. And that message is simply this: you are accepted. There's nothing you need to do or believe or say to earn this universal, unconditional acceptance. But to really believe this in your bones, you need to find the courage to be." You may ask, the courage to be what? The answer is startlingly uncomplicated. You need the courage to be just to be. Not to be this thing or that thing. Not to be anything at all. But just to be, just as you are, accepted by God and yourself as a being of worth. Start with this, and you will learn exactly who you are. Good morning. Well, it's really great to be back with you all again today, and despite all the things that are happening in the world right now, I hope you're doing well. I hope that this spring has been a life-giving time for you. When I first began discussing today's service with David a couple weeks ago, he mentioned that this month's Soul Matters theme was story. And I was really excited to hear that because recently I have been reflecting on a piece of wisdom that I received in seminary about the power of story. And no, it didn't come from a theologian or even a colleague, but actually from a man named Francois who works at the Sara Lee Baking Company. This is his story. Francois was an immigrant who came to the United States from West Africa. He arrived in New York City with a master's degree in sociology and high hopes of starting his career. So you can imagine how disappointed he felt when the only job he could find was doing dishes at a restaurant. He described calling his mother back home and feeling embarrassed, not wanting to tell her that he'd moved halfway across the world to be a dishwasher. But Francois also had incredible faith. He knew he had gifts, and he believed that God had a plan for him. And so he kept his head high, and he did his job well, and eventually his boss promoted him to making desserts. And that is when Francois fell in love with baking. He found joy and a sense of purpose in feeding people. He described sending beautiful desserts out of the kitchen and then waiting to see if the plates came back clean. He loved it, and he was good at it. So much so that in time he got a job managing his own baking crew at Sara Lee. And finally, in that role, Francois could blend his love of baking with his sociology training, understanding the dynamics of his team and recognizing their talents and inspiring them to take great pride in their work. Even when things were hard, he never let go of his faith in himself. And while it wasn't the path he expected, Francois was able to find a profound sense of calling in his career. And in a recorded interview about vocation, he offered some advice to others. He said this: "You are the story you tell yourself. So make sure you tell yourself a great story and live that story." Whether we do it consciously or not, we each move through this world with a story. We're meaning makers. That's what we're hardwired to do. And that story, it shapes our sense of who we are and what we're worth and how we experience this world. So you bet it matters. It matters a great deal what that story is. And in thinking about this statement, I have tried to reflect on what actually makes the kind of great story that Francois is talking about. And this is what I have come to believe. First, a great story centers our gifts and above all, our sacred worth. And that is what we see with Francois, even in New York City, all alone, with no one there to remind him of his worth or his talents. His story was strong enough and it anchored him. And that is what we are called to do. To cultivate that strong inner voice, the one that is actively narrating the story of our life in a way that honors and helps us to experience our sacred worth in each unfolding moment. So what story are you telling yourself? What is the quiet inner narrator saying about who you are as you move through the world? What does it say? How does it shape your actual experience of the things in your day-to-day life? We must make sure that our story reflects our beliefs, that it lives into that first principle of our faith that affirms our inherent worth and dignity. Of course, we know that's easier said than done, because though we intellectually know that truth, we also live in a world that teaches us to be hypercritical of ourselves, that tells us that we need to be constantly hustling for our worth. And by the way, I'm by no means saying that we are perfect, and I'll get to that in a second. But what it does mean, though, is that our inherent worth and dignity is not up for discussion. And we live out that truth fiercely in the way we tell our story. So how do we do that? Well, I think we need spiritual tools in our toolbox to help us activate and reinforce the truth of our worth every day. For some, that might look like a spiritual practice, perhaps a prayer, a reading, a walk in the woods, a run, something that begins our day by centering the sacredness of our story. For many others, music can be an incredibly powerful tool. I know I try to start my day by listening to a song that, simply put, makes me feel the way I want to feel about myself. Sometimes I need a song with a really strong beat. Other times, something softer and sweeter. But I have a list of songs that, in a sense, function as the soundtrack of the life that I want to live. Do you have a song like that in your life? Or a soundtrack, even? Maybe that's a conversation for an upcoming coffee hour. I also believe that simple mantras can help us ground us in our truth and even help to interrupt negative thoughts in our day. And one that comes to mind is from the movie The Help. And if you've ever seen this movie, you may remember that Viola Davis's character worked as a nanny to a young girl and would always say to her, "You is kind, you is smart, you is important." She'd say it over and over and over again and make the girl repeat it back to her until that truth was firmly rooted in her as the unshakable center of her story. If we were lucky, someone did that for us when we were kids. But let's be real, now we are adults. And when things get tough, Viola Davis probably isn't gonna show up in our life and remind us of how important we are. And really, no matter how many amazing people we have in our life who love us and affirm us, that's our job. That is ours and ours alone to know deep in our bones. And here is one reason why that is so important. Because when we do have that strong anchoring story of our worth, we can then also have the courage to face the hard truths about our life and know that our worth is not at stake. A great story is not just the good stuff. A great story is above all a complete and true story. Of course, it's tempting to tell a story that leaves out the parts that are hard to look at, that don't fit our idea of who we want to be, of who we want to be seen as. But we've got to honestly look at the whole story of our life, including that tender stuff. And here's why. Because when we leave the painful parts out, we know that we're doing it. Somewhere deep inside us, we know it. And when we try to bury those things, we do it out of the fear that we will be defined by them. You may be familiar with the Mexican proverb that wisely points out that what we bury becomes a seed. Brene Brown writes, "The irony is that we attempt to disown our difficult stories to appear more whole or more acceptable, but our wholeness actually depends on the integration of all of our experiences, including the falls." As we are in this moment, hopefully transitioning out of this pandemic, we can't just bury the pain and the sadness and the loss that we have experienced. We've got to have the courage to tell the truth to ourselves, to honestly sit with the pain of who and what we have lost, because that is the birthplace of healing. Acknowledge when we have failed to live our values, because that is the birthplace of accountability. Name the fear that lives in us, because when we speak it out loud, we begin to take the power away from it. We look at these tender things so that we can live with them, so that we can move through this world from a place of wholeness. When we have the courage to tell the truth to ourselves about our life, we will experience the peace of belonging to ourselves. And by the way, this doesn't just apply to us as individuals, but to our faith community, to our nation. We are seeing in our country right now a grappling with the truth. The truth about white supremacy, about the fragility of our democracy, of our healthcare system, so much more. Our failure to tell the whole true story of our country has left this nation spiritually fractured. But if we have the courage to speak the truth, we can give birth to something new in this moment. In our own life, in the life of our faith community, and in our nation, when we are anchored by the truth of our sacred worth and have the courage to embrace our whole imperfect story. That truth has the power to heal us and transform us and set us free. May it be so. Amen.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Our closing words this morning come from Brené Brown. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. True belonging does not require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are.
Extinguishing the Chalice by Elizabeth Sella Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Blessed be.
To my loved ones and relations, with me in spirit every day, to neighbors I have not yet met, close to home and far away. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. To my friends who make good music, sharing joy both far and wide, and to those who we depend on to teach, to heal and guide. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. And to all who hear this message, to strangers and to friends, here's an embrace of music until we meet again. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Be safe, be well, you mean the world to me. Come on now, be safe, wash your hands, you mean the world to me. Be safe, wear your mask, you mean the